listening to Sudbury News Talk.
I want to show you something.
Stand by. On the morning shift.
Anything
could happen.
Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift. I'm AJ Walsh. Glad to be here with you. Glad that you are here with us. Going to be a great show today. A little bit different. We have a special guest going to be joining us. Has not been on the show before, but I think we made an attempt before to have him on, and so we're looking forward to that special kind of topic. It's an event that he's putting on, and we definitely want to pick that apart. There's a video that goes along with that, and so I guess you can get your popcorn ready and sit back. It's your favorite beverage in the morning. You can have popcorn for breakfast for our video today. You have my permission. Anyways, we're live on cklu.ca. We're live on the radio. We're live on CKLU 96.7 FM. You can stream us on the internet by clicking on the Radio Player Canada app. You can download that same Radio Player Canada app and take us with you. Listen to us anywhere, anytime on your favorite device. We're on CKLU, which has been around since 1984. So it's our campus and community radio station right here in Greater Sudbury, Ontario, Canada. For those that are joining us around the world, thanks for joining us, by the way, and checking in, whether you're from Sudbury or you're just interested in the topics we're talking about on the show. We're glad to have you. Continue to be with us. We love spending time with you. And it's not only Sudbury-centric. It has other things that we talk about that deal with issues that I'm sure we all grapple with in our lives. We're also live on Facebook.com/Sudbury News, YouTube.com/Sudbury News. Thanks to our Facebook and YouTube moderators. We really appreciate the job you do. We're grateful for the platforms that we're on to allow a show like this to go ahead on radio, online streaming audio, and also streaming video. So it's really great. We're getting to as many audiences as we can. Make sure to like, share, follow, subscribe, so that way the word can get out as much as possible. We're grateful for those who've already been doing that. Make sure to, we added, 14 new followers yesterday. So grateful for that. We're continually growing. There's been some issues with, I guess, not growing as fast as, as we actually should. We should have about 20,000 followers right now, but they keep changing the algorithms and the way things go and whatever. So I hear different things from different people. However, we're just going to keep moving along and keep doing it until we can't do it anymore. Just having open, truthful conversations about what we see in our world around us, whether it's in Sudbury or our province, country, or around the world. With that, good morning, Vin. Thanks for being with us. Hope you're having a great morning. Also, Monique, good morning. I hope you're having a good morning as well. Thanks for being with us. And Judy as well. Glad to see you guys on the show consistently. I hope it's a great way to start your day. I know it is for mine. David, as usual, stay safe. Thank you very much. And Shane, thanks for joining us. We have a special show this morning. Jason Lafoche will be joining us. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. He has definitely been involved with the whole, the last couple of years, especially last February, with the mandates and the truckers and this whole idea of, we've been talking about this week. I guess it's been the theme. It wasn't even meant to be the theme; it just kind of happened. I was going to go down the whole, our elections being interfered with was the deep dive for this week for me, and we never even touched on it. I have so many videos backlogged to play, but anyways, it just seems like this is what it is, and we're going to go with the flow. Topics as they're important, and this resonated around the world. Speaking of topics that resonated around the world, this one definitely did. It influenced other countries to kind of say, hey, wait a minute, are we dealing with this situation exactly in the way that we should? Are we overreaching a little bit? Is the solution worse than the problem? And so Jason will be here to talk about that. And he sent me a video, really, really concise video on the whole situation and being able to talk about things rather than demonizing one side or another, having an open dialogue and not looking down on others for the way they look at things. And that's what the whole idea of, we could call it the Freedom Convoy, the idea of freedom. I love it. I think freedom is at the core of everything I stand for, because what was the quote before? I'll fight to my death so that way I can defend something you can say that I don't even agree with. I just paraphrase that, but it's the same idea. I would do the exact same thing. So buckle up. It's going to be a great show. We do have news headlines too. The Renee Sweeney murder case is going into deliberations. They're going to have possibly even a verdict today. That's as early as today. I don't expect that, however. There's also the Bridge of Nations shut down. Got a little bit of facts on that. Some sports headlines. There was a death, unfortunately, a crash early morning yesterday, just before we were doing the show. The news only came out, however, afterwards. We'll have a little bit of an update on that, a crash. So anyways, we got your weather, we got your sports, we got news headlines, and much, much more. And your comments, which are so important to this show. It's your show on your station. This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift on CKLU. I'll be back with some weather right after this. Sudbury weather brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. Currently, it is -4 degrees. Feels like -9. Today, we can expect mainly cloudy, flurries at times heavy. Beginning this morning and ending this afternoon, 30% chance of flurries late this afternoon. Local blowing snow after the snow we get. Amount of about 5 centimeters. Wind will be gusting up to 50 kilometers this morning. High of -1 with the temperature falling to -8 this afternoon. Wind chill -7 this morning and -14 this afternoon. Going to get colder. Going to have a bite along with the snow. Tonight, partly cloudy, 30% chance of flurries this evening. And the wind will still be gusting up to 50. Low of -13, wind chill -13 overnight. This evening, and then -19 overnight. Look at your long-term 7-day forecast. That is Thursday, mix of sun and cloud. High of +1. Friday, periods of rain or snow, high of 3. That's for your Friday. Saturday, periods of snow or rain, high of 0. Sunday, mix of sun and cloud, high of 3. And then Monday, 60% chance of some type of precipitation, +6 is your high. And then Tuesday, mix of sun and cloud, and high of +5. Little look at your satellite overhead over northern Ontario. You can see it's clear as of yesterday evening, and then the clouds are rolling in. For those on the radio, just describing that. It's your Sudbury weather, brought to you by sudburyweather.ca. We'll be back with some sports and headlines, a cool video, and a special guest right after this. Sudbury Sports brought to you by that Sudbury Sports guy, Randy Pascal, and his website, sudburysports.com. Sorry, I was going to say .ca. It's .com. So the Sudbury Cubs, they are in the thick of their first round playoff series. They almost got tied 2-2 with a close 2-1 game if they wouldn't have scored with just moments remaining in the last game. It would have been tied up 2-2, but they do have a 3-1 commanding lead on the Espanola Paper Kings at the moment. Next game tomorrow night at Tom Davies Arena in Lively. And it's 7 o'clock, I believe, that game. You get there early, get your tickets, make sure that you can get in. They might even, if they win that game, they've taken the first round. They also received some awards for the NOJHL awards, mainly that Kylo Ellis received the John Greenau award trophy, the Rookie of the Year trophy. So basically, congratulations to Kylo Ellis for receiving Rookie of the Year. The Sudbury Cubs always ranked in the top 10 of the of the Canadian Hockey League all season long, and they are definitely favorites to win everything. And speaking of people who are favorites to win everything, the Sudbury Five are in action this weekend, April 1st, April 2nd. So Saturday night and Sunday afternoon, both against the Kitchener-Waterloo Titans. They are welcoming their new player to the team. Excuse me. Dave Bell, we announced that yesterday. He'll be a big presence in the paint. It's what we need. Someone that can rebound, block shots, and give us a nice advantage down low that will help us take a big playoff run with a championship. That's from GM and head coach Logan Stutz. So welcome to Dave. He'll be a great addition to the team. And speaking of championships and playoffs, we seem to be in the thick of it with our Cubs, the Five on their way. They're first overall. Sudbury Wolves made the playoffs, and they're playing off against the Peterborough Petes tomorrow night. Catch that game right here on CKLU 96.7 FM. The Wolves will start their playoff season on the road against the Petes before returning to home ice Tuesday, April 4th, and Wednesday, April 5th, both set for 7:05 puck drop. The Wolves have a record of 3 wins and 1 loss against the Peterborough Petes. That's the reason why we were rooting for them to take on the Petes for the first game or the first series, is because they've had they won the series 3-1. And if they can do that, same thing, they'll beat them. They're only a few points ahead of them in the standings. And so definitely get out, support the Wolves. Playoff hockey, we haven't seen it for 3 years in Sudbury. That's your Sudbury Sports, brought to you by that Sudbury Sports guy, Randy Pascal, and his website. SudburySports.com will be back with headlines, a special video, and a special guest right after this. And with that, good morning, Belinda. Thanks for being with us this morning. I hope you're having a great morning yourself. And again, to encourage all of your comments on what we're talking about today. However, I have a feeling with our special guest, Jason Lafacci, afterwards, he was involved with the whole trucker convoy thing going across Canada. It was very, very polarizing issue at the time. Many people, picked sides, one side of the fence or the other. I'm not that type of a person, although I can really agree with one side. I don't have any animosity towards anyone for having their own ideas and their own ways of living their life. Actually, I'm very curious. That's why people like myself love to travel and see how other people around the world do things differently, right? They eat different foods. They speak different languages. They wear different clothes. They look different than us. And so I embrace the idea that other people can have different ways of doing things. You ever try a different nationality's food and go, wow, where was this my whole life? I didn't even know this vegetable existed. And so that's the idea of freedom itself, is to allow people to live a certain way. So that way, then you can possibly, your life can be enriched by someone else's point of view, someone else's way of doing something. Our way isn't always the right way because we only know so much. We were only an accumulation of what we learned so far. And so anyways, with that kind of prelogue, we're going to be delving into that later with Jason. Jason can talk to that more than me, but good morning, Randy. Thanks for being with us today. Headlines. This is interesting, right? So we'll just quickly go through the headlines this morning. Interim president of Ontario Nurses Association says Sudbury Hospital's delay in addressing ongoing payroll issues shows clear disdain for its employees and signal of issues with HSN's management. I wonder who's the management of HSN. We've been talking about that quite a bit on the Sunshine List. Anyways, yesterday, many people on the Sunshine List are just not able to do proper payroll somehow. And so some employees are getting paid more, some employees are getting paid less. There's a big schmozzle, and now it's tax season, and they need tax papers in order to do their taxes, and they're all wrong, right? Because they're not, their payroll is not right. So their tax forms are only a reflection of what they've been paid, which is not right. And so that's a big schmozzle. And my heart goes out to any of the workers there of the, just the mess that is. I know the CRA went through the same thing locally with their payment system called Phoenix, paid $1 billion for this thing, and it never worked. And they had to throw it away and just go back to the duct taped version they used before. So it goes sometimes with big organizations. Vote now for Greater Sudbury's worst roads and sidewalks. I always love this. The CAA launches their annual survey. Voting ends April 21st. Get online, vote for your worst street if you're driving to work every day and and your car is taking a beating on a certain road. Get down there and vote. Sudbury always ranks high on that list every single year. What you need to know about the Bridge of Nations construction was built in 1973. They've been doing some repairs underneath the bridge since August, and now they got to really just bite the bullet and do the repairs on the surface of the bridge, which means the lanes will be down to one lane on each side. They encourage you to do the zipper, which Sudbury's not very good at doing, and I'm just going to avoid that area like the plague myself. Hopefully, I never have to go over that bridge the whole summer. They're adding a bike lane, so that's good. I guess they're reducing the size of the lanes themselves for the cars, and so on and so forth. So the Renee Sweeney trial, the Robert Stephen Wright trial of the murder of Renee Sweeney, after weeks of testimony, a Sudbury jury of 12 has started deliberations. So today will begin the deliberations. We'll have the word very soon on whether it's going to be an innocent or guilty verdict or a particular, reduced charge. We don't know. Prime Minister's Christmas vacation in Jamaica cost taxpayers $160,000. So it's $160,000 on our dime. The Prime Minister is taking vacations on taxpayers' dollars. And then I go to, it says 4 comments, as you can see here, if you're able to see. 4 comments, says the names, and then I hit comments. They only allow me to see 2 comments on my own page. I don't understand what's going on here. I don't know. Anyways, some type of moderation. Maggie says, why do we pay? And Kim says, good, I hope you had a great time. Possibly sarcasm there. So unfortunately, we lost a member of our community yesterday. A 47-year-old woman died after a crash with a tanker truck. Picture of it here. It's unfortunate. Happened at about 6 a.m. yesterday at MR 55 and Mumford Road, police say. The name of the individual has not yet been released as far as I know, but my condolences go out to the family and friends of the individual. Very sad. Don't like to see things like this ever. So now it looks like we're going to have joining with us. Might as well introduce him now because he's joining us, and then we're going to get to the video he shared, and then we'll have a great discussion with him. So Jason Lafacci, have I pronounced your name correctly, Jason? Your last name?
Yeah, it's Lafacci.
Either one? Are you saying tomato and tomato to me? Is that what you're saying?
Well, because when my family immigrated from Sicily, the French government changed our last name to a French last name rather than keeping it an Italian last name.
Okay. I see. That happened to many, many, many of our recent ancestors, right, coming to this country, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In Canada and the United States, anglicized names or francophonized, I guess you can say, in Canada. Yeah. So welcome to the show, Jason. This is your first time being on. I know we tried to connect a few times before, and I've had a chance to watch your show immediately following this one a few times, and I really I think you do a lot of digging. You're able to find out a lot of information, and I learn a lot from your shows. And I know you've been on our show commenting, and you've watched quite a few times. So tell us a little bit about yourself, because I want to get into the video that you share with us. I think it's really important. Kind of set the tone for your big announcement on what you're going to be doing this weekend. But tell us a little bit about yourself first, and possibly, why you're on the show today.
Okay. So a lot of people in Sudbury know who I am. but a little bit about myself that people don't know. I've been around Sudbury. I mean, I employed over 400 people in Sudbury before at a call center, and I've been a member of the community. But also, I've been a member of community where I've voiced a lot of concerns of bad leadership and corruption in our city. And with that comes some, I get flack, right, from the hardcore liberals and NDP in our town, and but they just don't get it. So I've probably been the most hated person in this city.
Okay, wow, that's not a badge that you
No,
wanna
I'm
have.
serious. I'm serious.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because the messaging that we're going with right now is to try and bring the opposition, like both sides, to the center, and
Exactly.
try to get rid of this political atmosphere that's basically invaded our society and is taking control of everybody's lives, right?
Yep.
So that's what's part of this protest too. I mean, the protest we're doing in Ottawa this weekend, it's a national shutdown, but at the same time, we're using process. We're doing something that we never did before as Canadians. For one, we've never tried this process yet, and
Yep.
two, with the convoy, I've been accused by the government, along with my friends who helped organize it, Chris and everyone, and Pat and Tamara and that, and saying that we were trying to overthrow the government and incite sedition when we weren't. We were simply exercising our ability of free speech, our right to free speech, sorry, and free expression and free assembly, and everybody knows the history. But apparently, to some in this country, there's this, I don't know. I find that there's this problem where one side can protest all they want, do what they want, but the minute that anybody else does it, that same group is out there and they're attacking us, and it's crazy. Like last night was pretty bad at I think it was at Peel Region, one of the schools there, and the members who are protesting to protect trans kid are violently assaulting children, senior citizens, and women at this protest last night. So this is going to come out today with the public, and the police stood there and did nothing. So I got a lot to discuss with the Ottawa police today in regards to that, because I'm going to be clear about my demands in regards to my protesters that are going to show up. Like if these people show up, and I want these police to do something about it. Right?
And we want to dive more into that, but that's coming on the heels that you talked about in Toronto, was on the heels of the unfortunate mass shooting in Nashville, which took place where a trans person killed 6 people, including 3 9-year-old girls, and it seems like there's some kind of a movement going on where they're inciting violence, and that's the result of that. It looks like it's spilling over to Canada. But before we digress a little bit more, I just want to play the video that you shared with me, set the tone. We'll come back, we'll talk more, because I think it explains it very well what's been going on in this country. And so a lot of people who may not be familiar, I'm sure this video, if you just stick with us with this video, it will really give you a really good background. I was really impressed with the production of this video, the host, and we'll be back right after this with more Jason Laflaci.
Today I want to talk about language. This isn't a story about vaccine mandates or efficacy. It's about how language is used to shape our perspectives and the political landscape around us. The Freedom Convoy is a case study that shows us where the Overton window lies in our society. The language that people with power and influence use can give us a little peek behind the curtains at how their thought processes work. And to do that, we need to take a step back and look at the big picture. What lengths would the average citizen have to be pushed to make them drop everything and drive all the way across the country in the dead of winter? Well, just imagine after a year of lockdowns and sacrifices and financial instability, the stuff that we all went through. Whenever you looked at the TV, you'd see people in the news talking about you like this.
Oh, you can't shame them. You can't call them stupid. You can't call them silly. Yes, they are.
Go with the tinfoil hats.
Oh, 4th booster shot, robot. No, listen, here's the deal. Moron.
It's time to start shaming them.
Selfish, uneducated, stupid, arrogant, conspiracy theorist. All of a sudden, the pandemic's your fault. I mean, listen to this. This is Howard Stern. Hospitals should ban COVID anti-vaxxers. You're going to go home and die. That's insane. If hate speech is real, That's hate speech. Not only was this anger and scapegoating accepted by the government, but it was perpetuated by it. Listen to this clip of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on a Quebec-based TV station.
Opposés à la vaccination,
Ils sont extrémistes.
qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes aussi. C'est un petit groupe, mais qui prend de la place. Et là, il faut faire un choix en tant que leader, en tant que pays. Est-ce qu'on tolère ces gens-là ou est-ce qu'on dit, ben, voyons.
If you showed that clip to someone 15 years ago, they'd probably assume he was talking about a terrorist organization, not a group of hardworking, tax-paying Canadian citizens. But all this rhetoric was for a purpose. It was laying the groundwork. If the government could convince people that unvaccinated people weren't their friends and neighbors who just had differing perspectives, they were actually hateful racists and misogynists who shouldn't be able to take up space, well then they could take away their rights and no one would say anything about it. And that's exactly what happened. Through the means of both legacy and social media, the notion that unvaccinated people were second-class citizens spread throughout the mainstream. The government was able to force people out of their jobs unless they compromised what they believed in. They took away people's ability to provide for their family, and that didn't go too well.
In Canada, thousands of people have been protesting in the capital.
The crowd there is growing larger.
Now we have to understand, the government totally forced their hand. The people couldn't voice their frustrations publicly because the idea that the government couldn't dictate what you put in your body was forced outside of the realm of public discourse. And they also couldn't just ignore it and move on with their life because they couldn't put food on the table anymore. And so they were left with no choice. If the country was going to ignore them, they had to do something big to get people's attention. Now the government had two choices. Number one, use diplomacy and talk about it and find a solution that everyone involved could get behind. Or number two, double down on your divisive language and drive the wedge further into an already fractured political climate. Which do you think they chose?
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has come out with his strongest words yet about the protesters who've taken to the streets of downtown Ottawa.
We won't give in to those who fly racist flags. We won't cave.
Justin Trudeau was very clear in his messaging. These were not the hard-working patriots that he praised earlier in the pandemic. These were a roving band of hate mongers, or as he so eloquently put it,
The small fringe minority of people who are holding unacceptable views.
a phrase that now lives on in Canadian infamy. Now I want to talk about this for a sec, because I think this is really interesting. This is one of those times that the language can give us a little peek behind the scenes and see what's going on in his head. Now he's very clearly using the word minority as a jab, right? Because, you know, they're a minority. We can just ignore them. Most Canadians don't see it that way, so they don't matter. But this is a prime minister who was elected on the basis that he'd be a voice for minorities. Indigenous people, Inuit people, people of color, Francophones, these are all people that he claimed had minority rights. But his comments show that he truly doesn't believe in minority rights. He just believes in rights for those who agree with him. Now, he was just trying to paint a picture that there were just a few people protesting him because it's important that he gives off the appearance that he's very well liked. But let's take a look at the numbers for a second. The convoy itself reached around 70 kilometers in length, which is quite a ways, and they were joined by thousands of people on overpasses, bringing them home-cooked meals and stuff like that. And once they arrived in Ottawa, police estimated there was as many as 18,000 protesters at Parliament Hill, which is a lot, but that still doesn't even scratch the surface. Through crowdfunding, they were able to raise $24 million from 230,000 individual donors. That's a lot of support, but that's still not all. It inspired protests all around the world, in France, in the UK, in New Zealand, in the US. This was a massive movement, and despite his efforts, Trudeau wasn't able to minimize the support. So the next strategy to justify the hate speech was to cherry-pick the 4 people who brought hateful flags to the protest and try to paint everyone as Nazi sympathizers.
Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas.
Again, that's 4 people out of hundreds of thousands. That's 0.0016% of the protesters. This gross tactic was effective for 2 reasons. Number 1, it gave people another reason to vent their frustrations onto their fellow Canadians. And number 2, a story about Nazis roaming the streets gets a lot more eyeballs than one about thousands of blue-collar workers losing their jobs. You know you've successfully dehumanized a group of people when opinions like this are mainstream. So now that the government has made sure it won't face any consequences from the citizens, it is able to move on to the next step of the plan, the Emergencies Act. Now, to truly understand how massive of a move this was, we need to revisit a little bit of Canadian history. Let's turn back the clock to the year 1963. The city of Quebec is made up of mostly French-speaking people, but there was a minority of Anglophones. The minority Anglophones made far more money than the Francophones, and this led to the French-speaking people feeling like they were second-class citizens and that the government was not looking out for their interests. And this neglect manifested itself in a very violent way. The FLQ were a Marxist group of radical separatists turned terrorists that wanted Quebec to declare independence from Canada. They communicated their message through a 7-year terror bombing campaign that came to a head in October of 1970 when they decided to kidnap 2 politicians, Pierre Laporte and James Cross. Obviously, this was unprecedented for Canada, so the federal government sent in the military to help deal with it. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. When asked how far he was willing to go to stop the FLQ, Prime Minister at the time, Pierre Trudeau, responded with,
"Just watch me."
After this infamous exchange, Pierre Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act. Now this is just the predecessor to the Emergencies Act, but they're similar and intended for the same purpose. Even with the sweeping powers this gave the government, unfortunately they were not able to save Laporte. He was executed by the FLQ and police later found his body in the trunk of a car. But the point is, even after all of this was a massively controversial decision. After 7 years of bombing neighborhoods and public spaces, after kidnapping politicians and executing them, after all this, people were still like, maybe that's not enough to invoke emergency powers. But there's a reasonable case to be made for emergency powers when citizens are being blown up. So what was happening to Ottawa citizens in 2022 that would need such an extreme reaction?
Anytime I heard a honk of a horn, and particularly a large vehicle horn, I could feel it sort of ripple through my body, and I would feel that my nerves were still frayed. I kept hearing them like phantom horns. I kept hearing them in my head. I also had phantom smells too.
Now, in the interest of not being a total hypocrite, I should try and empathize with these people. And I do. I think it would have been really hard to put up with all that commotion for days on end. And I might even agree with using emergency powers if the government had exhausted every avenue of relieving pressure. But the government never even entertained the idea of hearing them out. Instead, they insulted them, ignored them, and punished them. It's a sorry state for a democratic nation to be in when the first and only way of dealing with protesters is to starve, freeze, and force them out like criminals. This window into Justin Trudeau's mind that his language afforded us shows us not the mind of a democratic leader, but that of a tyrant.
Of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say we need to go green as fast as we need to start, investing in solar. I mean, there is a flex.
And I know the images that pop into your head when I say tyrant, but we have to remember there's more than one type of tyranny. There's the upfront, in-your-face tyranny that we saw in the 20th century, but then there's the sneaky, subtle kind, and that's called tyranny of the majority. I've got this book by Timothy Snyder called On Tyranny, and it's 20 lessons that we should learn from tyrants of the past century. And I think it has a quote that summarizes my point really well. It's number 17. Listen for dangerous words. Be alert to the use of words, extremism, and terrorism. Be alive to the fatal notions of emergency and exception. Be angry about treacherous use of patriotic vocabulary. I mean, that sounds like it was written specifically for the climate of today. When leaders think they can decide what's acceptable and unacceptable for their people to believe in, when they question the very foundation of democracy.
Using protests to demand changes to public policy is something that I think is worrisome.
It is so important that we recognize patterns in history and learn from them and heed them as warnings. Now, this is just one case study of many that shows us the pitfalls of a politically divided society, but it's not exclusive to one side or the other. We saw the same scenario with roles reversed in the BLM riots of 2020. We get put onto sides and told to toe the party line, and anything outside of that is heresy. Instead of looking across the aisle and seeing human beings that are hurting and need our support, we listen to the political talking heads that tell us they're the enemy. You see this in words like extremist, far-right, libtard, homophobic, racist, snowflake, anti-vax, groomer, social justice warriors. They're all synonyms. They're all used to paint your own beliefs as superior and all the opposing ones as barbaric or silly. These words are all cudgels handed down to us by the people in the media, and we're told to use them against the people around us. And they all serve the same purpose: to dehumanize others and make us feel like we are better people than those around us. When Justin Trudeau calls those who didn't get vaccinated racist and misogynist, he does that to appeal to people's ego. It makes people think,
well, those people are racist and I'm not, so I'm much better than them.
And then people get defensive and they respond, well, I'm not just a sheep that listens to whatever CNN tells them. I'm not that dumb. Then we get into this cycle of ideological supremacy, and it has no end. And the only way to break that cycle is to understand that we all have the same intentions. We all want to see our country be the best that it can be. We may disagree on how, but we all come from the same place. But empathy is not a lucrative business. There's so many people shouting at us, telling us what to believe, who to hate, what the answer is. But when we look at their incentives, it's all the same. War makes a lot of people poor, but a few people very rich. And that's no different in a culture war. So whenever you hear someone trying to convince you to hate your neighbor, just know that that's a losing game, and you should be very cautious about listening to that person. But don't take my word for it. I asked the all-knowing AI, ChatGPT, to combine all of human knowledge to write me an essay about the dangers of using divisive language to tear people apart. And it ended with this. This tactic has led to the persecution, suffering, and death of many innocent people. It is important to recognize and resist this tactic whenever it is used, in order to protect the rights and dignity of all people. AI's coming for all our jobs, man. That was too good.
All right, so that's the video. Thank you so very much, Jason, for sharing that with me. I think we could have discussed the same issues. It would have taken us possibly a lot longer, and maybe we wouldn't have been as clear as this particular gentleman was able to put it forward. And I know I saw some comments coming through from the gentleman, Dave, in the comments, who seems to not be a supporter of the convoy, and that's perfectly fine and good. But I think I just let the video play, and I think a lot of the sentiments from the narrator in the video were obviously able to kind of say what I would have said back to his comments. You can read those in the comment section. I just want to say good morning to Diane, as she is on. I hope you're having a good morning. So Jason, also a couple other comments. Please pay attention to those in the comment section. Oh, so where do we go from here? Now, the convoy was last February, and okay, this is explaining what happened there and why, but what now? Like, what's going on now? Is everything over? Like, what are the issues today?
No, it's not over. It's actually, they've dug deeper. I mean, I think what Canadians need to realize is that this pandemic created an opportunity, just like the finance minister said. You know, she did say that in the public, that it was a opportunity for them to make a change. And if we go back in history a little bit and look at what China did after their economy crashed and they were trying to rebuild it back in the 70s and 80s when they imposed a new dictatorship. And, they did a lot of pretty crazy social reform where a lot of people died, a lot of people were persecuted, and they rolled in flat out communism. And look at China today. Now, some people will argue with me that that was a good thing for China. In a way, maybe it was for them. But
there's many Canadians, including the chair of the program I just graduated from Laurentian, who said, she agrees with China. China is the model. She loves China. So there's many Canadians, I think, who actually, like our prime minister just said, admire China and really think that's a great model. Look how successful they are.
Yeah, and we have, and the thing is like, we could do better as Canadians with our economy and the way we do things. It's just we have the wrong people in power right now. And we cannot ever allow our democracy to fall to the hands of communism. We know over history what communism does and what it's done. And I think the difference between China's form of communism versus others like the Russia and the Soviet Union and stuff is basically how they handled their financial markets and how they handled economic reform and stuff. So there's a lot of differences in different types of communism. But at the end of the day, when you look at China, they invest heavily into their GDP, into their military. They conscript. It's part of their whole rollout. So for me, I still consider, a superpower as such a threat to our country. But now it's to the point where, we're not done. Yeah, like the convoy didn't win the battle that we went there for. Okay, well, that we recognize as organizers. But when we were done, after everybody left Ottawa and the troopers came and beat us up and stuff, there was a leadership meeting between Dr. Ted Kuntz, Kirsten Kelly, and Dr. Jordan Peterson, which I was invited to.
Oh, cool.
In this meeting, Dr. Jordan Peterson explained to all of us. He said, "Look at the ones that are there's few of you remaining, and you guys need to take a step back because you need to focus. If you guys are still on the fight to try and do something for the country, there's things we need to do because we have this potential interference with intelligence agencies and stuff." And he stressed that. But what he also stressed to us was the fact that we didn't win all the battle, but we won a lot of small victories. And the small victories are, if you look around today, folks, some may not agree with me, but if it wasn't for our convoy, if it wasn't for me and my friends working hard together to get the truck started, to organize and then compel Canadians to support us. I mean, look at, we raised not only did we raise $10 million once, we raised it a second time after they stole it from us. So that tells you that we had major support from Canadians. And to this day, when they look at all the donations that came to the convoy, 90% of it was Canadians. It wasn't foreign influence. It wasn't the United States. It was Canadians, donating $5, $10, $20. I mean, it added up. So, when you look at all that, and then today, what I did is I recognized what Dr. Jordan Peterson said. I actually took that to heed because I was already on the whip about, corruption and our political atmosphere, on right down from the municipal level all the way to the federal level. They all collude together with their corporate friends, and it's affecting our society. And for me, I'm an activist when it comes to the opiates, and I'm a hardliner on that because I don't understand why our leadership in this country will roll out programs to kill our population when it should be the reverse. Our country should pride itself on keeping our population healthy and motivated so that we can have a strong workforce. I mean, we only have 40 million people in this country in comparison to all the other superpowers. And here we are, we have a country that's trying to portray itself as a superpower, but we're not. So, all this stuff, it's nonsense. So over the last little bit, one of my jobs as organizer for the convoy was also intelligence. So when I got to Ottawa, I was put in a room, basically working with other hackers that committed their time to basically our job was to gather intelligence, any video evidence of anything that was nefarious that would harm our participants or anything, and especially make sure that we're keeping an eye on law enforcement. That was the whole thing. So while we were doing that, our team decided, let's start profiling politicians because we have friends in Ukraine who are sending us all these videos with Ukrainian Azov fighters flaunting Nazi symbols, right? So when I didn't even know about this. I had no idea that this was going on in Ukraine, and apparently it's been going on for a while. So when I seen this, I started I already knew about Chrystia Freeland's ties to her grandfather running La Visti or La Christi Visti, or in Ukraine, it's a nationalist newspaper that was sending Jews to their death for Hitler, and she's part of that. So I mean,
people can, and again, when you say this, people can do their own research, right? When you say anything that you're saying right now, people have the ability to go and double check on their own instead of just dismissing it as you're just making this up or you're hearing it. So it's a big claim. So, but people are able to find this information out.
Yeah, it's all been published on mainstream news outlets and stuff. So I mean, anything I'm telling you right now, I actually can back it up. So if people want to see solid facts and evidence, what we've been doing is every time that we gather intelligence, it's on my website. So if you go to www.freeradio.ca and you click on intelligence and resources, there's a whole thing there. Like my file with our group is Freeland. It's the federal government. So let me tell you, I'll tell Canadians this: our government is so corrupt, and they're dead in heels with Ukrainian Nazis, with communist China, and in a way that if we don't do nothing now, okay, and we don't do something about these liberals and NDP, it's not the conservative, it's the liberals. And if we don't do nothing, we're going to lose our country. We're going to lose it real quick.
Well, I'll also say the conservatives say the right things, but I'm sure there's factions as well.
Oh, yeah.
Every party, no party is unpenetratable,
No, and this Chinese collusion, there is MPs from the conservatives who've been involved.
Exactly.
Like MP Soroya, right? So Bob Soroya, he actually took money from the Chinese Communist Party, and they flew him to China, and it was reported in the press. It was on National Post. It was in Global. So that came out. When we start looking at our elected officials who are playing part to, hacking away at our democracy, eroding it. I mean, we pride ourselves on that, and I think, for myself as a Canadian, I don't want to see my country fall apart, and I stand strong for democracy because it gives us the ability to have a voice and at least somewhat of a fair process. It may not be fair right now.
Now you might, exactly. Now the thing, when we say democracy, there's a problem with democracy. Now I like the idea of a republic, the way the United States was first formed, the republic that's based on principles that don't change, and so you always got to adhere to those principles, and it doesn't change, and so you'll always have strong foundation for your country. Problem is with a democracy, if you have a war of ideology and you make people believe something that is not in their best interest, they'll actually vote for their own demise, and that's the problem with democracy. So democracy is the first step to socialism, which is then the next step to communism, and we're right now seeing ourselves in this war of ideology. Different people, actually, a lot of people will feel what's wrong with communism. Actually, maybe that's good. You hear this term democratic socialism. Bernie Sanders in the United States ran on that whole idea, and that's again just right. We're already socialist in Canada. We just are. We've been socialist for many, many, many years, and we're just one step now away from communism. But again, people in a democracy, like you said, could actually vote themselves into slavery or into communism because they actually agree with the principles,
exactly.
And I don't understand that. And it just is, that's where we are in Canada. Many people believe in these principles that are not in their best interest, and they will just definitely not serve them very well by adhering to them.
No, you're right. I mean, you're right about that. There's the foundation of democracy, in terms of being able to bring fairness to the people, right? So they can have a voice equally. But it's, again, I'm with you on the republic thing, because that's what I'm trying to do right now. Is I'm trying to keep our democracy solid in order so that the people have a fair process. That's one part of democracy that I respect. However, you're right about other elements of democracy throwing us into socialistic regimes or pushing us in further to communism, because there's elements of democracy that maybe need to be reformed and looked at, because democracy can mean many different things, and depending on how it's how can I say that,
because Justin Trudeau uses the term democracy all the time. He goes, we need to do this.
I mean, you can use it, but the meaning of it really is what people need to understand. What is real democracy? Now, if when you compare the United States, okay, so the States is based on a democratic function, just like Canada is via the voting process. That's basically the foundation of it. I respect that part of it, but it's like you said, they have a constitution and they have things that just don't never change because it protects their rights. In Canada, it's like look, we have the Constitution of 1867, and then we have a Charter of Rights, and then we have a Bill of Rights. Like, what shouldn't we as Canadians and the leadership of this country, maybe look at all these functions and say, well, they trump each other. They're actually built to harm Canadians if Canadians really researched it, because they move the goalpost all the time. And if you look at legislation they roll in, mandates and statutes and stuff, I mean, believe me, they work around these things. I mean, when they wrote the COVID-19 mandate, which was rolled in by China, believe it or not, democracy, like our system, like our Charter of Rights, our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, everything was just basically ignored for the first time in Canadian history. And they modified the War Measures Act, called it the Emergencies Act, or Emergency, it was Emergencies Act. But even with that, the National Emergency Order was a way for them to basically suspend all our rights, our charter, our bill, our Constitution and stuff. But yet, when you look at the functions of things they did to roll out, okay, like the Privy Council, what people don't know about this, the Privy Council is your Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, MPs, and parliamentarians, and ex-MPs, ex-Prime Ministers, and ex-Senators and stuff. So they still stay in the loop. All the old people are in the Privy Council. The Privy Council was given the mandate by John Wu, who is one of the directors of the Public Health Agency of Canada, who wrote the mandate for COVID-19, who, when you go look at his information, he's part of that espionage with China direct. So
here you see policies being drafted for Canada that are coming from exterior sources. It's China, exactly. Well, I've always said, now, again, because the race card is used, right? Always used. If you try and question something, you're a racist. Now, I've often said, if you look at China, how many other nationalities do you see in the Chinese government?
None. Zero.
Are they racist?
Well, I mean, okay, so the racist thing is being thrown around quite a bit.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm kind of getting tired of it.
This is where I think we're, those who are, I call them radicals. That's the label I give them now. It's like, if you're going to continue to attack people based on opinions or whatever, and then say whatever, you're a radical. That's the way I look at it. Because look at we're all human beings, right? We all bleed the same blood. We just look different. So who cares if we look different, have different skin tone, whatever? It doesn't matter. But the point is we have nations, and nations is a little bit different than social groups, right? It actually is, because nations are there to protect its people, its borders, its health, its national interests and security.
But we're seeing the erosion of nations before our eyes. There's no doubt about it. Economically, socially, as we get these global conglomerates working with governments, they're basically with the UN and WHO, and we already have like the world courts. We already have these organizations that have been set up that we're kind of going to for authority and things. And we can see a globalist world in front of us, and we see that's where there's a huge push. You have your WEF, not elected people that are all experts with elected people on taxpayers' dimes going to these conferences and discussing our futures and how they're going to go. Like there's something that should be wrong about that. But back to the whole, I had, again, the racist thing. Dr. Theresa Tam, born in China, is our chief medical health officer of Canada. And you could say, just me by saying that, oh, you're racist by bringing that up. She's another nationality.
No, we're just pointing out the concerns.
Yeah.
See,
I'm concerned.
It's exactly with me. I'm concerned too, right?
Because when you are a Chinese citizen, you take an oath to the government of you're loyal to that government. And how do we know or do not know whether that loyalty still exists or not? That when they're raised in a country and they take oaths to a particular flag or a particular ideology, that they're still there. And the way the pandemic came down is Justin Trudeau took orders from who? The public health experts, right? So right then and there, I would have been racist by saying that, but I just had to say it.
Oh no, I mean it's true. Like all of us, I can agree. I bet you all of us here, even those who are opposed, can agree this one thing. Did all of us question at some point during the COVID lockdowns and stuff, Did anybody raise this question? Who's telling the government what to do? I've always asked that question from day one. I never understood, that a public health agency just rolls out something that quick. That it's impossible because pandemics are unexpected. They're typically a random thing that happens with nature, right? Like the flu from 1918.
1918. Yeah.
So when you look at that and you say, okay, that was just random, whatever. But then you look at COVID. This is my opinion of it. Okay, so there was an attempt in history twice, okay, prior to COVID, to control the population. Now, at both attempts around the world, there were protests going on. That was a fact. So back in the 70s during the swine flu, there was protests that were going on in Israel, in the Middle East. There was other protests that were happening out in the Soviet Union, prior to the fall of the Berlin Wall. So the government teamed up with Big Pharma because, they tried to control. So in the States, there was the swine flu breakout, right? There was no swine flu. The thing was, there was no pandemic, no epidemic, no nothing. But they still rolled out a vaccine, scared the public into thinking that they're going to get sick if they don't get this shot, right? And look what happened. A bunch of people died and got injured from a vaccine that didn't work. And then what were the repercussions of that? Well, because they didn't do their due diligence at the time, they weren't as smart as they are and sophisticated as they are today. What they did is it rolled back on the government, and there was mass court cases, mass financial claims and stuff like that people got. So, I mean, it was basically a bitch slap to the United States of America. And then you go a little further. You go further. Okay, they failed at their attempt in the 70s. Yeah. Then you move forward into the late 80s, early 90s in Canada when we had SARS. Again, the government in Canada took a virus and they manipulated it in a lab, and it was spread to the masses. And that's the truth about SARS. And if anybody paid attention to the media when all that was going on, the Liberals and NDP were screaming to lock us down. They were screaming to put masks on us. And what happened? Everybody had that concert at the Molson Center for AC/DC, and boom, SARS disappeared, right?
Well, AC/DC is pretty powerful. I mean, if I was SARS, I wouldn't want to be keeping around, with them. Now, unfortunately, we are at a time, and I just don't want to just cut it off like that. But at the same time, CKLU has another radio show right after this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So, Jason, let's have you back on after the event that you have going on. I shared it in the video in our lower third there. So if people want to go back and see the video, see the poster, it's there. Go to your website, freeradio.ca. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So freeradio.ca, you'll see all of the information there if you want to support the cause and get behind it. And who couldn't be behind freedom? It's just we all have different versions of it.
What it is?
Well, the only problem is we're just out of time, unfortunately. But you got 10 seconds to do it if you can.
Okay, so what we're doing is we have a petition in the House of Commons to go to the opposition. We're asking the opposition to compel the Governor General to dissolve Parliament with the right function of her discretionary powers that she has as a procedure of the House of Commons. It's in the procedure book. We're asking her to exercise that discretionary power. We've spoken to Elections Canada, and we're asking for two things. One, because there's collusion with the intelligence agencies that affected our elections, we're demanding a new election to have a fair voice. And two, because the Liberals committed a crime and violated the Elections Act and Referendum Act, we're asking that the Liberal Party be deplatformed for one term to allow Canadians to freely allow the process to float and possibly create a power vacuum for independent candidates so that we can actually form a republic for our country. So we're looking for change, and we got a lot of support. So if anybody wants to support, watch my show, visit my website. And thank you for having me on.
Also, Kim had a question for you, but maybe you can contact Jason over his Facebook and ask him that. It says your poster said you want to remove the Liberals, and that's not democratic by removing the Liberals, obviously, right?
It is democratic when you're using the process. You have to remember the reason why we're asking to remove the Liberals is because they colluded with a foreign state, and they actually rigged elections. They rigged elections. I wouldn't be doing this if they didn't do this thing. We know.
So you mean actually, if you do something wrong and you do something illegal, you should be found accountable for it? Is that what you're saying? As part of our democracy?
Yeah, I mean, look at it.
There's laws.
Yes, exactly. Like,
Okay.
look, I committed crimes when I was 18 years old, and I had to pay for those crimes, and I did.
Correct.
I paid my debt back to society. So if I have to do that as a Canadian citizen who votes, and the Canadian government goes out and colludes with a foreign state and manipulates our elections, that's a crime. So therefore, we have a voice. It was just we had to research and speak to people to find out what the process was for us to actually bring accountability for the people of Canada. So the Governor General was very clear to me personally about her role, because nobody knew what she could do. Everybody sent letters and doing all this stuff and saying, "Oh, she's doing this, she can," and she never could, because there's language. The language is important when you bring a protest or when you bring a petition in front of the House. So her rule under discretionary rule is unconstitutional governance. Basically, look, can you tell me that our government is constitutionally governing Canada right now? No, they're not.
Yeah, and that's true. And there has to be laws in place. If let's say someone did do something criminal and they need to be accountable, look, there's been U.S. presidents who've resigned before because they've been found to do things. What is done, it has to be democratic, obviously. And so you're just trying to do whatever is right according to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and just follow our laws. And if you're a government that's not going to follow your laws, you're asking for accountability on that. Pretty much, did I sum that up? Okay. Thanks, Jason. Come back on the show next week and let us know how it all went. And great to chat with you today. Let's do this again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, having me on, and I'll see you guys next week.
Okay. Ciao. Thanks, everyone, for
Ciao.
joining us. Earshot Daily is next on CKLU. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. Ciao, everyone.
This is Sudbury News Talk on the morning shift.